Join me as I dive into a world of football innovators like Amos Alonzo Stagg, Paul Hubbard, and Bob Zupke, and challenge myself to uncover what truly makes the game a game of changers. It's all coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Before we get into our episode today, let's take the time to drill that football right into the like and subscribe button on your console so you know exactly when the notifications come up of the latest releases of Pigskin Dispatch podcast for some more great football history. Now on to our episode. Can you believe that football would not be the game that is today without innovators? Things like the huddle came to football long after the game started playing. It wasn't an exception at the origin. And we're going to talk about these stories and more of where the huddle came from and others. But first, let's start off with a little bit of a story. Now, there was a lady that recently was married, and she wanted to be the perfect wife for her husband. So she would make a roast and cut the ends off of it to cook it. She would take a ham. She would cut the two ends off of it, put it in the to cook it. So her husband was admiring this, loved the food, thought it was delicious, but said, "Gosh, why is she doing that?" So he was afraid to ask his wife, but finally one day he brought up the nerve and he asked her, and she said, "Well, I didn't do that because that's the way my mother prepared it." So he went to his mother-in-law, asked her, "Why do you cut the ends off the meat when you put them in to bake them?" She said, "I don't know." She goes, "That's just the way that my mother taught me." So he goes to his grandmother-in-law and asks her. And she said, "Well, it's really simple. When we were younger, I didn't have a big pan, so I had to make the meat fit in it, so I cut the ends off to fit it in there." So sometimes things are done just because that's the way we know it. That's the way it's always been in our lifetime. And that's the thing, the huddle. It's always been there. Except, now, recently, the last 30, 40 years, teams have gone no huddle and calling signals at the line of scrimmage. But that's really how football began. But where exactly did the huddle come from? Now, it's an interesting story. At high stake football games in 1894, the strategy is unfolding. And every time the quarterback signals the next play, the opposing defense seems to know exactly what's coming forth on it. Now, the quarterback in question is a man named Paul Hubbard, an uncanny player who, for Gallaudet University Bison, he was nicknamed the Eel. Now, the world's most famous and prestigious deaf university in Northeast Washington, D.C., had been fielding teams since the 1880s. And for the Bison, sight mattered more than sound, meaning their plays were communicated through visually signaled hand signals. Now, Hubbard realized his team's greatest strength was also its greatest vulnerability. His hand signs were giving away his plans to the defense. In a moment of profound, straightforward innovation, Hubbard called his offense together and directed them to form a circle around him so that his teammates were shielding his hand signals to his opposition. Now, it was a great idea because the deaf players had to need to hide their visual communication from their opponents as unlike hearing teams could, and it was just the ticket. Now, though decades later, there was competing claims of who invented the huddle. The University of Pittsburgh player Herb McCracken in 1924, or the University of Illinois coach Bob Zupke, known for his inventing the onside kick, the flea flicker, and the screen pass. Gallaudet's story predates them all by decades. Now, based on the Gather Round Boys, a history of huddling article from Football Archaeology, here's a chronological list that Timothy Brown of Football Archaeology had brought in developments of football history of the huddle. Now, before the rule of possession, huddling served no purpose as the game was a nearly continuous flow that was played like rugby. 1894, the Paul Hubbard story comes in where he gathers his fellow teammates that are from the deaf school, Gallaudet in Washington, D.C., and shields his signals so they're not stolen by the defense in a huddle, a circular huddle. Now, Paul Hubbard's tenure as a quarterback at Gallaudet, the period ended which he was credited with the first game huddle. In 1919, some 25 years later, Bill Hargis appears to have used the huddle with his Oregon State team for one game. Now, in the 1920s, huddling became more normalized in football. In 1921, Zupke popularized the gathering by having the Illinois Illini team huddle in the first game of the season, which led to numerous teams copying these so-called tea parties in between plays. 1921's Navy victory over Army was also credited in part by their use of the huddle, becoming quite the popular brand there. Now, there was different variations of the huddle. The circular huddle was the first. Then there was the V formation. There was the typewriter formation, and there are many different variations. Some with some players facing the line of scrimmage, some facing away from it, and all kinds of different ways coaches were trying to get their quarterbacks to communicate the next play and strategy on the next play. Now, the innovation quickly took root, and from Gallaudet's Washington campus, the huddle spread fast across American football. By the 1920s, the formation was common enough at college games to even draw complaints from fans who felt that it just slowed the ball game down, and even drew a secret gathering with jealousy to guard the strategy not to be denied. Now, the huddle inevitably took over not just football, but also basketball, baseball, and other sports, offering a universal sanctuary for the devious language of athletic strategy. Now, Paul Hubbard, known today as the daddy of the huddle, was honored by the Gallaudet Student newspaper in 1941, a lasting testament to the deaf athlete whose ingenuity fundamentally changed the way the game is played. Now, there were some challenges to the huddle all along. And in the 1980s, Coach Paul Weiss of the Cincinnati Bengals and some other innovators right after him, like Marv Levy with the Buffalo Bills, they decided they didn't want the huddles. They wanted a high-paced, fast offense, get as many plays in an offense as you possibly could. They came into the no huddle, or as when Jim Kelly was coaching Levy's Buffalo Bills, Machine Gun Kelly, where it was just a very rapid pace, calling plays, trying to keep the defense off balance, not letting them rest, not letting them substitute. And you see that quite a bit today with the substitution rules of the NFL. As long as the offense doesn't substitute, the defense isn't allowed to have time to substitute. They can, but the quarterbacks will snap the ball, and there's some very clever ones out there that will do that. So the huddle has become a centerpiece of communication for teams, letting them have that secret little society that nobody else knows what's going on except for the 11 in the middle of the field and the coach that called it to go in. And it's really kind of a cool. And even in the days of the modern technology of the microphone and the transmitter in the helmets of the quarterbacks, the huddle still prevails. Defenses love the huddle too. They want to call plays, call their strategies, see which ways they can take advantage of the offensive line and other schemes so they can prevent the offense from moving the ball. We all have our secrets in football, and they all start at the huddle. What a great form of communication. We owe it all to the ingenuity of a quarterback at Gallaudet in the 1890s. Interesting story, interesting stuff, some great football history. Glad that you could join us today. Hope you join us each and every time we have one of these great podcasts come out. You can do that by liking and subscribing your YouTube channel or on your favorite podcaster, or check us out at pigskindispatch.com. Till next time, everybody, have a great gridiron day. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.